You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is sponsored by Codify, a California benefit corporation. Visit Codify at www.codifi.com. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 107 for March 29th, 2017. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we spend the entire episode answering a few questions from a listener. He's in school and wants to get into CRM archaeology. We set him straight. So, get your own questions ready to send in because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Joining me today are Chris in Portland.
Hey, how's it going?
And Bill in Arizona.
Good afternoon.
All right, so I'll preface this by saying I've heard just a couple Skype hiccups from Bill because he's on his phone this time. So if we hear any craziness, we'll try to fix it in post. But, it is what it is. That's what happens when you podcast pretty much all the time. Every time. You just find a place to do it.
You should be used to it by now because I have a feeling that every time I speak, it's somehow edited out. I'd never hear myself talk.
I know. We always edit you. We just make it so you sound smart so you can get, work and stuff. So,
Yeah. It actually took me 87 hours to build the custom filter in Audition to only filter out Bill's voice. But man, was it worth it?
Right?
Those 87 hours?
Listeners are increasing. Now I know why.
That's right. It's the Bill bot.
This episode is unique for many reasons aside from filtering Bill out entirely. So we're at a new recording time. It's probably not going to be a permanent thing, but this week we just had to move to a new recording time. So that's why we don't have the normal cast and crew with us today, and it's also why we don't have the guest that we had planned on having on today, just because timing was very difficult this time around. But Webby, do you want to introduce the first topic that we were going to cover? We had a great email from this guest that he reached out to Webby.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'm going to butcher his name, which is really the primary reason I wanted him on this call. But it's totally crazy, and it's 14 letters long with only 2 vowels. So anyway, he references a couple things in here, which I'll get out of the way real quick. He mentions that he came across one of my interviews on a YouTube channel called Archaeology Fun Time. Check that out, actually. I've done a bunch of things over there. It's my friend Richie Cruz, who's a CRM archaeologist, and he's put together a fantastic little series of videos, and hopefully we can get those in the show notes. I'll link over to his YouTube channel. And he just, has a lot of nice little things for people getting in the field. And him and I have done a few longer format videos just on topics, just ranging from all kinds of different things. So go over and check that out. But, okay, so I'm just going to read this email, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about this because it's from somebody that has a similar background to a lot of us. And he's got similar goals as a lot of us listening to this. And, with spring coming up and people graduating and summer approaching, there's going to be a number of people that can be helped by just listening to this conversation, which is why we wanted him on in the first place. And since he was going to come on the show, I'm assuming he'll have no problem with us, calling him out on this. So, all right, so here's the email, and then we'll talk about it. My name is Ed Mazinski, I'm going to go with.
We can just call him Ed.
Ed, it's going to be Ed from now on.
That's the easy way.
Yeah, right. So he says, I'm a history student at Wilkes University in Pennsylvania. So that sounds like he's a current student there. I'm reaching out to you hopefully to gain some insight. I came across a few of your interviews on the Archaeology Fun Time YouTube channel. Since then, I have subscribed to the podcast, I assume he means this one, and have seriously been considering CRM as my career goal. So we clearly failed in our job. Anyway, I felt inclined to email you after seeing the one video because I couldn't help but feel that we had a lot in common, and I hope you can understand the position I'm in. He says, I too have had the dream of being an archaeologist since the first time I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. Nice. However, at age 17, I joined the Army thinking that would be a grand adventure, which admittedly it was. I learned a great deal about hiking through tropics and deserts with heavy equipment and reading maps. It seems like CRM involves some of that also, and yes, it does. 4 years have gone by, and even at the highest of times in my career, I couldn't help but wonder why I wasn't training to be an archaeologist. So now I'm 21 now. I'm in the Army, Reserves, and for the past year before continuing on in school, I worked as a carpenter. My father is a self-employed carpenter, and I have always helped him. It's crazy how similar this is because I went into the Navy. Long time went by, and then I went and helped my brother out with his father-in-law's carpentry business, which was crazy. I think CRM is similar to construction on the business side of things, with proposals and quotes and contracts. It's something I'm very familiar with. So as I mentioned, I'm currently a history major with a minor in Spanish. I'm planning on going to a CRM field school in Arizona this summer. Here lies my questions for you. Does having a bachelor's in history benefit or inhibit me in the CRM field? I understand some jobs can involve a good amount of research, which is the primary focus for history majors at my school. I do have the option of majoring in archaeology from a different school. My fiance and I plan to move to Seattle by 2019. And let's see. And what kind of options do I have with my bachelor's? Getting a graduate degree and ultimately one day becoming a professor is, at least for now, part of my lifelong goals. I understand when you first get into the business, you have to work your way up. I'm very familiar with that, being in the Army and being a carpenter. I know how to check my pride at the door. I'm serious about being a professional. My whole life I've been chasing this goal throughout all these twists and turns. It seems that my past experiences have been shaping me towards CRM. In the Army, I got so good at land navigation that I was tasked to redesign and build out the first land nav course at Guantanamo Bay, where I served for over a year, and as a carpenter. Nice. And as a carpenter, I have written countless detailed contracts and helped my father make estimates and deliver quotes. I'm really excited for the future, and I'm looking forward to hearing what advice you have for me. So, boy, Ed, do we have some advice for you? I'm sure of it.
Yeah, so I've already had one threat to boycott any show that I'm involved on, and I think this one might deliver another threat. Temple of Doom is the best Indiana Jones movie. I'm just going to put it out there. I know
Wow.
that's not a popular opinion in archaeology, but Temple of Doom, like power ranking, Temple of Doom is at the top.
Your second favorite must be Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I'll just say I didn't hate it.
Yeah, only because it was an Indiana Jones. That's the only reason why.
Right?
Yeah. Just a comment on Ed's email. I think that this is a really good email to have as a follow-up to the past two episodes where we talk about side hustle, because it sounds like Ed is very familiar with side hustle and very familiar with just kind of grinding it out and making other things work in life until you get, a viable path through archaeology. So hopefully we can offer some kind of viable path to archaeology for him, because I think that a lot of people are in a similar situation.
Yeah, well, I also think if there was ever someone who could possibly actually become Indiana Jones, it's Ed. Because this guy, like, at 21 years old, he's, so much more. I think at 21 years old, I knew how to like wash dishes and push shopping carts. And, this guy redesigned a land nav course and, designs contracts for construction. If there's, or for carpentry, if there's anyone out there who actually has a chance at totally dominating, it's this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I can't say enough for your maturity level in I mean, this isn't Israel, so I don't think it should be mandatory, but going into the military after high school, for some people, now true, other people, it would be the worst option you could possibly do. But it sounds like for Ed, and I know for myself, I mean, I was directionless when I got out of high school. I didn't join the military because I didn't have other options. I actually really wanted to go into the Navy and work with jets and, see the world, which I did, which was great. And it sounds like Ed did, a very similar thing, and he was very motivated there. Some people at that age, they go in and they just kind of toe the line until they get out. They were in for weird reasons. But now it sounds like he wanted to go, and it sounds like he really did a good job at it. And that has given him a fantastic skill set. He's got some leadership ability. He didn't even mention that. But being in 4 years in the military, especially the Army, you move up relatively fast in the lower ranks. And when you move up, you instantly have people under you in the Army. So he has leadership ability. He has the ability to start a task, manage a task, and complete a task. And then, not even mentioning the construction and carpentry stuff. I mean, that takes a lot of, paying attention to detailed instructions, attention to detail, and then all the other business stuff associated with it. I mean, he sounds like somebody that, honestly, if I had a contract right now, I'd probably hire him because.
I was gonna say he sounds like the kind of person I'd end up working under. Not very long from now.
Right,
Yeah.
totally. And I'll say, just kind of ticking off his questions here, one of the first real questions he has is a bachelor's in history going to benefit or inhibit him in the CRM field? I don't think it'll do either of those things. I don't think it's a benefit necessarily because, one degree over another. I mean, really, an archaeology degree is what people look for, anthropology. So it's not a benefit in that respect. But I don't think it will inhibit him either. I've known plenty of people that had history degrees in CRM, and they went to a field school and they got hired on a CRM project. So, you guys must have known history majors as well in
Yeah.
CRM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say the first thing that pops into my mind is, archaeology, that's great, but has he ever thought about like historic preservation? Because a history
Mhm.
degree plus a master's in, if he can find a place that does heritage conservation or historic preservation, or if he just defaults to anthropology, a master's in that, with his carpentry background and his understanding about like scoping, architectural projects and stuff like that, he's in an excellent shape to become like a architectural historian, and that's more rare in anthropology. But companies, I mean,
Mhm.
to even like describe a shed, they're going to want to know who's the architectural historian who said this was or was not historically significant. And somewhere out there, someone has to sign off. So either it's your supervisor who has that experience recording buildings, or they literally pay an architectural historian somewhere to read what you wrote and
Mhm.
then sign off like, yeah, this is a good description. Architectural history, to me, it sounds like that's something that he could just, with his experience and knowledge, just slide right into, with a master's in almost anything plus his history degree. But
Right.
it's mainly his carpentry skills and his understanding of contracts. Like that, to me, is something that is really rare.
Mhm.
And if he could mix it with history, then he's like a super desirable gem that every company needs to know or have at least one
Right.
of.
Well, Bill, I think you hit the nail on the head right there because, especially out here in Nevada, Nevada changed their guidelines not too many years ago, where if you have a standing structure on your project, you can't actually even do anything about it as a CRM archaeologist. You have to hire a qualified architectural historian, and they write a separate report, an architectural history report on that structure that gets submitted with your final CRM report. So, and most of the architectural historians that I know, I mean, some of the companies have them, but you honestly don't find that much, just out in the desert that needs that kind of thing. So, like, I have one person that I call on. She's an independent contractor, basically. She has her own business, and she just does architectural historian stuff for people when they need it. If I have something, I just call her up and she does it. So, with his history degree, he's clearly, by going into history, it sounds like he's interested in history as a thing. I don't know. Maybe he just did that because he didn't know what else to do. Maybe they didn't have archaeology. I'm not sure. But
Yeah, maybe they
so,
didn't have anthropology at his school.
right, totally. So he sounds like he's interested in history. He's interested in carpentry enough to, learn about it and be really good about it. He's got a family history with it. So understanding those details, he's already got that in his head. And then if he were an independent contractor, like here in Nevada as an architectural historian, it sounds like he could probably get a handle on the business side of it pretty quickly too. So yeah, your only option is not archaeology in a lot of cases. There are so many things you can do in this field.
Yeah, I think those are both great points from both of you, and I think I would just add that uh, to follow up on the idea of him being an architectural historian and using his background in carpentry to kind of like double dip there, as it were. There's a need for people with a mind for archaeology and people with a mind for historic preservation in development, and I think that it sounds like he's still at a point in his early career that he has a lot of malleability, that he can shape his path and explore different options. And I think that exploring options of like spatial planning and development as well as historic preservation
Hmm.
could be quite lucrative and pretty innovative as well, and kind of shape the path.
Hmm. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the recipe for like a state historic preservation officer, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that plus a graduate degree and some experience, especially if he seems like he's planning on going on the full distance. If he is, interested in maybe being a professor one day, that takes PhD. Like that just basically takes a PhD. And with his experience, if he could, parlay that into the higher levels, I mean, the state historic preservation officer we've obviously got 50 of them plus every territory, and then they have an office usually of a couple other people, and a lot of times they tend to be architectural history heavy. So, that's definitely a way to go, especially if he's getting a field school here. And then if he actually worked in CRM as a, tech or even crew chief, I mean, there's a lot of different ways this guy can go.
Yeah. And, building on that history degree, he mentions in the email that he says, I understand some jobs can involve a good amount of research. That's true. And then that's not true. If you go into archaeology, you're probably not going to do any research until you're a project manager, maybe. So
Yeah,
Or
man,
or if
I'm
you
always
work
shocked.
with Chris ever. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
I'm
yeah,
always shocked at like the level of to which theory and research is just
yeah,
lacking from CRM. I think that that's one of those things that I think it shocks most people when they really get into it and like, like you had said, yeah, you get kind of back into it as a project manager and as a PI, principal investigator. But there's so much of stuff that you're not really doing the research. You're looking for the
hmm
boilerplate text and you're just more or less copying and pasting. And, it's quite rare that you get a chance to do kind of academic style research in
what?
CRM.
Oh my God, that's the reason why I've been on this thing all the while.
Yeah.
You
And
guys
like,
aren't even reading, you're just cut and
Yeah,
pasting. Jesus.
yeah, I've worked with people who have said, I don't use theory. And I'm like, You do, you just didn't do the research questions that got you the
right.
boilerplate text, like theory is all around you, man.
Uh,
Like there's a reason you're
Yeah,
doing this.
well,
I don't do theory, and the entire thing they're doing is loaded with theory. It's just you don't understand
yeah,
theory, is what you mean.
yeah.
Right,
Well,
right,
to
right.
finish off that point before we go to break, I think going the architectural historian route, if that is something he might be interested in now that he knows about it, that would be laden with research immediately. Even if it's just historical document research and things like that.
Yeah.
If he likes that, and it sounds like he's getting a lot of experience doing that, looking at old maps, looking at the sandbarns, looking at all kinds of stuff, and then even going and talking to neighbors and talking to descendants and stuff like that. I mean, that does involve a fair bit of research, I would say, as opposed to, like we said, archaeology, which, like, even we're giving archaeology a hard time, but even it really is the number of people involved. Like, you got 30 people on a pipeline. The techs are never going to do any research whatsoever, even if it was a research heavy industry. The techs just aren't going to do that, and you're going to be a tech for a number of years before you're a crew chief. You're still not doing research at that point. Then you're a project manager. Now you're doing like lit searches and stuff like that. At some other companies, you might be doing some papers and things on your projects where you will, want to do some other research, and then, moving up into the PI level where hopefully maybe by then you know how to run your company and you have some time and maybe a little extra cash to actually do some research. But we're talking, 10 years down the road minimum.
And I think that the idea of progressing through the ranks, I guess
Mm-hmm.
we could call it. I don't really like that concept, and I know a few
Mm-hmm.
others that don't like it. But uh, being promoted from field tech to project manager to PI, like you're still going to perform the duties of a field tech. So even though you're still doing research, you're also out in the field teching, which is, it's just kind of a brain drain and it's a little
Yeah.
monotonous.
I gotta say this before break, that is not always true, you guys. Come on, man. You guys know that people who are techs still get a chance to present at conferences, even local ones. You guys know that they still get to contribute if they're actually interested. It's just that many people keep their head down, or they work for companies that are like either too afraid of sharing
Mm-hmm.
any kind of data because they work for some kind of client that wants to keep it like under the radar, or they're just like uh, apprehensive about anyone besides their few select people making those
Mm-hmm.
kind of decisions. Because I know from the time that I was a tech all the way up, I was doing conference papers and stuff, and whether they paid
Yeah.
for it or not, all I wanted was to not get fired. So I was doing that kind of stuff all the while, which probably is what made me the freak that I am today. And not only that, I have talked before about boilerplate. If you see something and there's not numbers on it, and people have not cited specific pages
Yeah.
that they looked at, you need to go back to those references and look at it, because it's not just good enough to take whatever article and then cut off the page citation and just slap it in there. That's the kind of slop that makes sure this place, the what we do always sucks and remains monotonous and not interesting whatsoever. So I got to do the devil's advocate there. If you want to research and you want to do that kind of stuff, it is up to you, and there are chances to do that no matter what anyone says.
Well, you're right, Bill, and that's the crux of a lot of what we say is it's all about personal motivation. If you want to do something, if you found a cool site when you were out being a field tech and you approach the PI at the company, the owner, and say, hey, can I present at the next regional conference on this site, and get the permission from the agency or landowner or client or whatever, more often than not, you'll hear yes, and you'll have to put in a lot of off-the-clock work to do it too.
Yeah.
But it's...
Yeah, because all those guys that are tasked with theory half the time and, the actual research are probably not interested in that site or don't want to go to that conference or just don't want to do the extra work that it takes for you to give a conference paper. So, or if they find out that they're not going to get every single thing paid for, then they definitely don't want to go out of their way to do the extra mile, right? Because they've got a mountain of other work. So to create a conference paper, they'd have to carve the time out of their personal life probably to turn it into something that they give a talk about and then convince the company to do it. Whereas a tech who's super motivated, they might have been the first-hand individual who actually dug that site, that excavated those things. And it's a 15-minute talk. And if they're willing to do it on their own and you get to look at the PowerPoint and you get to talk to them before they actually give the talk, I mean, who's to keep them from doing it? And a lot of companies want that exposure. So if there's a super motivated person who's a tech that, looks at the company's research and then gives whatever kind of version of what needs to happen for the company, and they're willing to give that talk in front of people. I mean, you're right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times you have to give your talk before you go to your boss or to your company, and they'll all give you comments, at least in, a place where people are checking on you or whatever. In the past, most of the companies I work for, all the people who are going to the conference give their talk to the people at the company, and then they give you comments on how well you did, and you make those comments, and then you go to wherever, SAA or the local Arizona one or something, and then you give your talk.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go to break. I'll just make one correction because, Bill, you mentioned theory, but like we said before, there's no theory in CRM. All right. Back in a minute.
Let's face it, the quality of archaeological field photography could really use some improvement. We aim to change this with the Codify Magic Photo Board. This lightweight but incredibly durable board is designed to help you take color-perfect photos of artifacts, features, and sites using almost any camera, even your smartphone. You need to see it to believe it. Engineered from exceptional quality, color-safe, high-pressure laminate, Codify Magic Photo Board is ready for tough field conditions. It's guaranteed to level up your photography. Start taking publication-worthy photos right in the field with the Codify Magic Photo Board. Available now for pre-order, visit codify.com/APN. That's codifi.com/APN today and get your promo code exclusively for listeners of the Archaeology Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back from the break, and I just had a really quick comment to follow up on Bill's point about how you can find ways to use your own time and energy to present at conferences and make it worth your while. I completely agree with Bill, and I would just say it doesn't always have to be the main conferences. It doesn't have to be the SAA or the big regional one. You can reach out to your local professional archaeology group or the just the Archaeological Society and just kind of workshop your talks and see the reception there and just kind of build an interest there. But like Bill's saying in the background, you should always go local first. And I totally agree with that. Like that should be something you're doing anyhow, whether you're presenting or not. You need to be involved with your local archaeological society.
Absolutely. All right. He does say, continuing on the email, that he has the option of majoring in archaeology from a different school. Again, I think I would, it doesn't. I'm not sure how much time Ed has left. He does say he's 21. Maybe he just entered school not too long ago, because if he did spend some time in the Army, then he can't be. He said 4 years, so I don't know when he started school, but he sounds like he's got a little ways to go. Anyway, I would definitely listen to some more of these podcasts, ask us questions, email Bill, email myself, email Chris Sims, and check out Chris's blog and podcast as well. Go dig a hole. And listen and figure out what your options are, because you might not need to switch to archaeology. Just saying. And also, Says him and his fiance plan to move to Seattle by 2019. Nice choice. Also super expensive because that's where I'm from. But anyway,
super awesome though.
but super awesome. Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty great. But he wants to know, let's dive into this just a little more to make sure we cover all the bases, because he does say, what kind of options do I have with my bachelor's degree? Now, I'll kick that off by saying it really depends on where you're at. If you're in the Southeast, then your option is field tech or crew chief. If you're in a lot of parts of the country, your option in archaeology anyway is in CRM archaeology is field tech crew chief. Out here in Nevada with a bachelor's degree, you can actually become a PI with your bachelor's degree as long as you have the right experience. You have to build experience in certain BLM districts, and then you can get permitted as a PI, and then you can act as a PI at a company. I know at least 2 people, and probably a lot more, that are PIs at companies. Now, the one downside to that is when they move to another company, they're going to kind of be low on the totem pole with that company until they can, then move up again. Their experience is still the same. They're still permittable as a PI, but there's, you come back down the line. Now, also in Nevada, you're not going to get, if you wanted to start your own firm for some reason or take over ownership of a firm, they're probably not. I talked to them about this before. It's highly unlikely that they'll give you the cultural resource use permit as a company owner without a graduate degree. So you can PI under somebody else, at somebody else's company. But if you ever want to move outside of that and start your own thing or something like that, then find a partner or something, or get your graduate degree if you want to own a company that way. So. What other things can he do with just a bachelor's degree and nothing else, guys?
Oh, tons of stuff. Like I know people who have made it pretty far with bachelor's degrees.
Yeah.
I would say like one of my mentors, whether he knows it or not, is Carl Shields. He's an archaeologist for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and he partially did some of his grad school work and then didn't complete it, but he got an amazing job with the transportation cabinet there, and he's doing some really cool research as well. And he's published papers, and he presents at conferences and all that. And he's really involved in the archaeological community out there.
Nice.
Yeah, one of the best. I guess technically he wasn't a PI, but he pretty much did all the work of the PI that I ever worked for here in Arizona. He had a bachelor's, and he just hired PhDs so that he could get all the certifications he need for the state of Arizona. And it was him who was doing most of the work and, looking at what we were doing and editing our text and, making sure we got things straight. So he's a great supervisor and awesome person. He does really good business with different companies here in Arizona, and he has a bachelor. So, yeah, it's more difficult though now than some of these, old timers, because the rules have just consistently gotten more and more stringent with degrees, and there's definitely degree inflation going on. I think it's degree inflation, and I do see a situation where companies are reluctant to hire people who don't have. I think we've talked about this before. People who don't have graduate degrees uh, for their techs. They're interested in hiring techs that have a master's degree because they
Mhm.
believe that they can train this person up. I think that's wrong. Not for like the business standpoint, but as far as the career development and fostering the next generation. If we only hire people who have masters, then the folks who have a bachelor's, they're forced to go back to school for another degree to even
Mhm.
try archaeology. I feel like, field tech and even crew chief should be about experience and, work ethic and connections, your ambition, rather than what kind of degree you have. So that those he can do a lot of things, but the reality is eventually he'll hit this situation where if he wants to continue going up or have mobility, he'll probably have to get a graduate degree.
Yeah, that's true. And I know a handful of people that have kind of resisted that their whole lives, and then just end up being bitter about it when they can't move up and they keep doing the same thing. That being said, when we're discussing all options, there are people that really just enjoy being field tech and occasional crew chief for their entire careers. That happens a lot out here in California. You find a lot of quote old timers, and by old timers in CRM I mean like 40-year-olds that that they've just been a field tech for their whole life. So, and they like it. They like traveling around. They like not having the responsibility of project management and things like that. And there's a lot to be said for that. Because, you get your 50 cent to $1 raise to get 7,000% more responsibility. Sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it's not worth the headache and the life stress. But let's move on from that a little bit, because over the break we talked about something, about the fact that Ed here is a vet. He's a veteran. So just for other veterans that might be listening, or people currently in the military that are getting out and are interested in this, don't forget to use your GI Bill. And when I went in the military in 93 and got out in 97. And when I was in, you had one chance to sign up for the GI Bill because it accrued. Like, you paid, I think, $1,200 into it. You paid $100 a month for your first year in the military, which actually hurt quite a bit because I was getting like $600 a month. So that was total bullshit. But when I got out, I had the GI Bill at, I think it was valued at about $25,000 when I got to use it, and it's gone up incrementally with cost of living and all kinds of stuff. They raise the GI Bill once every couple of years, or at least they used to during the Clinton era. They did when I was in. So, and I'm sure Obama raised it. I don't know what the Republicans did, but you'd have to find out. I'm not even going to go there. Not even going to go there.
We know the end of this movie Titanic. We know what happens.
Right. So get out your polishing rags, because no. Anyway, so anyway, be sure to
on that brass.
I know. Be sure to, if you got the GI Bill, and if it's still the same thing, again, my information is over 20 years old, so hopefully you have current information. But the GI Bill is a fantastic thing. When I was going to flight school, before I even went into archaeology, I burned my whole GI Bill before I even got into archaeology in college. So there's that. But it's not even, when I was in it, and the rules may have changed, it wasn't even necessarily for tuition. You had to be enrolled in a program. You had to prove that you're enrolled, and then they sent you a check every month. And that check could be used for your house payment, your car payment, whatever. You could still be. You have the option of getting. It's to get you through college. So you had the option of getting your student loans to pay for college, and then paying all that back later on for the next 50 years of your life. And the GI Bill could cover your living expenses while you were doing that. So, if you're going to use the GI Bill for living expenses, if you can still actually do that, make sure you go to college in a place where, that'll actually cover your living expenses. If you're going to college in downtown New York City, then GI Bill's not going to go very far. But if you go to college somewhere that happens to have a halfway decent program and a decent cost of living, then you might not have to put out any money to go to college right now, because you'll be paid for your living expenses and you can get student loans. Again, not the most ideal situation, but to get you through and to get you into the workforce, that might be what you have to do. And then there's veterans preference stuff that quite frankly changes with most schools depending on how they treat their veterans. And it's a very different situation than when I was in, because we didn't have all these wars and the sheer high number of veterans that we have now because of, a decade and a half of conflict. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say on that. To continue that is just make sure you check everything out. Make sure you go to your civilian transition office, because there is one, and get all the information about what benefits you have coming to you. And let me throw this in, just because I never did before. I went probably 97 to 2007. I went probably 15 or 16 years before my dumbass went to a VA to get healthcare. And I'm sitting there in CRM as a CRM archaeologist traveling around the country going, oh, I don't get healthcare. I'm poor and I don't have anything. But I had like 100% healthcare waiting for me because I was on a flight deck, so I had 10% disability. So since I'm disabled at all, theoretically, I get 100% healthcare from the VA. I just had an angiogram and an ultrasound and stuff on my heart, and it didn't cost me a dime. So keep that in mind. Don't be a dumbass. Go to the VA hospital immediately when you get out and get your benefits. And you get it for the rest of your life. So anyway, Bill, he's got another question here that I think you can help answer.
Yeah, about going on to becoming a professor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because for background, this is what Bill's doing. Bill, you were a tech for a while, then you were crew chief, and you've moved up the ranks, and now you're going on to be a college professor theoretically.
Yeah. So I'll just tell you that college professors come from somewhere, right?
Right.
And so it's gotta happen to someone. So somewhere along the line, universities do train people who have the right kind of skills at the right kind of time for the right kind of institution that makes it through the political process of hiring new faculty, and that's how we get professors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being here at the university and being close to the end of my PhD, I've been spending quite a bit of time applying for jobs. Yeah, so I guess I'm just going to lay this out there. I have been working on being on the job market because I'm almost done with my PhD, and I recently found I do have an offer from a certain prestigious university, and I'm really excited. There's no ink on the contract yet, but it's moving forward, and I'm going to hear about an actual official offer anytime in the next few days.
Nice.
And so I ended up winning the lottery, right? And I
Mhm.
think we have all heard Doug Rocks McQueen tell us that we have a better chance of dying of cancer than we do of becoming a tenure track professor, right? However, I'm living proof, or soon will be, that that is possible. So
Mhm.
they have recommended to their board that they want me to become the assistant professor. Okay, I don't have a contract in my hand yet, but it's working its way through the process. Now, I'll just tell you the way that I ended up doing that is by not listening to half of the information that I was given along the way as far as what you should do, right?
Right.
They tell you that you should do some awesome research that you feel is important and that you could really get behind, because you're going to spend 4 years or maybe even more working on this dissertation and doing this kind of research. And they tell you that especially if you're coming in without a graduate degree, which I already had my master's, that you need to get your bearings and take these courses and learn about anthropology and archaeology at the higher levels before you can make a decision on how to write your dissertation or what kind of research you should do. And we've talked about this before, whether to do an exotic project in another country versus a project here in the States. And the advice is, like, whatever opportunities you have to you, especially if it's something that you really want to do, you should really go for doing it, right? And then that you should write peer-reviewed journal articles, and you should publish your dissertation. And then based on the merit of those articles that you've written as a PhD student and your dissertation, that's what you present to the committee, and that's what they're going to make a decision on. So that's only partially true. Not only do you have to write the peer-reviewed journal articles, but you also have to do the kind of work that actually matters for institutions where you'd want to work. So if you want to work on pyramids in Egypt, then you need to do the kind of work that an organization that hires people who work on pyramids would do. You need to look at the kind of departments that have any kind of Egyptologists and have any kind of interest in hiring Egyptologists, because Middle Tennessee State probably doesn't really want that. Universities in upstate New York, they probably don't really want that. And actually, the majority of universities in the world probably don't want an Egyptologist. It's the same thing with working in Central America. It's awesome to do Mayan work. However, not every school needs a Mayanist. And we're talking about people who have tenure jobs. They're not going to retire for like 40, 50 years, right? Once you
Mhm.
get that job, you're never going to leave it, right? So, uh, when you finish your degree, if you've focused purely on some kind of, very targeted exotic dissertation, and all your peer-reviewed journal articles are about exotic stuff, um, then you have really not just like typecasted yourself as a certain person, but you have concentrated to the point where you almost have no options to get a job.
Right.
So the alternative is to do the kind of job that universities actually need, and then not really rely on your peer-reviewed journal articles, which 100 people a decade will read, but spend your time promoting it across all kinds of other media, including public talks, uh, you know, uh, um, conferences within your department, within your city. And that's the other thing too. If you do something that actually matters to the United States or a region of the country where you'd like to work, then the people who live there, they actually hear about it. And if you do it to an impressive scale and do a really good job, uh, then you'll be more marketable to more universities. And also these days, universities are especially in anthropology departments, they're trying to figure out how to engage students, how to increase enrollments under undergrads, and they're also trying to figure out how they can go flashy and digital, which includes not only teaching online but also incorporating stuff from the digital humanities. And then they also want the kind of person who's gonna like uh, further the cause of their university, right, of their department. And so they care about like academic rigor, and that's where those articles come in. So not only do you have to be good, but you have to be creative, and then you have to do something impressive, and it has to be pitched to the right university at the right time, which there's no guarantee when you graduate that the universities that are available that you could possibly even apply for a job, not only are you not sure that they'll even choose you, but you're not even really sure if you're the kind of person they need. Then you never know who you're going against, so you never know if your project is awesome enough to beat the other people, right? So in my case, I won the lottery, right? So far, we'll see when I get the contract in my hand and I sign it. We'll see. They've assured me that they're going to offer the job to me. I just have to wait, right? So it's preliminary, really, for me to tell anyone. But uh, when it comes down to it, the project that I did with River Street and the publicity and all the stuff I did for my dissertation project is a lot different than most people who, do some zoo archaeology project or something like that on like, some kind of paleo site, and then they write like 2 articles about it.
Right.
I mean, the end result of what I did is a lot different than doing that. Even if it was groundbreaking work, the impact of that work reached a much broader audience. And then I was just absolutely, it was a miracle that a school like Berkeley even needs anyone, right? So when I'm in my last bit of finishing school, there was only 3 places I could apply, and one of them turned me down because I didn't have my PhD. The other place, I filled out all the stuff to apply, but their ad they had taken out for a full month, but it was open until filled, and they filled it before the month was over. So I went to apply to the job, and it was closed, and it had been closed for weeks, but they had paid for advertising till the end of the month, so they were just sending an email saying, sorry, it's already closed. And then I applied to Berkeley. And those were
Nice.
the only 3 possibilities that I could have chosen given my like life situation, my family and all that stuff this year. So if I didn't get any of those, I'd have to wait all the way until next year and pray that some university in the zone where I can live needs a person that specifically did exactly what I did at the time when I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as like planning on becoming a professor, if you want to become a professor because you want to teach, just teach. Teach on PCS. Create a
Yeah.
blog. Start teaching. Teach whatever you want. Create your own YouTube channel that's based on things that you've learned. Just go ahead and teach. If you want to do it because you think that you need to do research that you'd really like to do, for example, the Mayan example, why not just do CRM and then keep your fingers always in that situation, and then when it's summertime, you just take a leave of absence every year and go and do your Mayan work, and then spend your other free time reporting on Mayan stuff and writing articles and doing all that. So if it's research, there's still no limit there either. If you want prestige of going for a university, then you're going to have to do the ridiculousness that I did, and it could cause you to have a nervous breakdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a reality. That's the way that I pitch it to people who want to go the tenure
Yeah.
track route. That's what you're going to have to do, and also every star in the universe will have to align exactly at the right time. It's more complicated than blowing up a planet with a Death Star.
Nice. Well, on that note, let's go to break real quick and then come back and unpack that little monologue. Back in a second.
I'm Jessica Yaquinto, and I'm the host of the Heritage Voices podcast. Heritage Voices focuses on how CRM and heritage professionals, public employees, tribes, and descendant communities can best work together to protect their heritage through tribal consultation, collaborative ethnography, and indigenous archaeology. Now back to the show.
All right, and we're back from the break for our final segment. And just to follow up on Bill's advice, geez, where do I start? All of that's amazing advice, and to elaborate, there's a lot of doom and naysaying around pursuing a career in academia, and I think Bill's advice is particularly important because it highlights that it's not impossible, it's just really difficult. So it is possible, but you've got to be super dominant and you've got to cover all your bases and you've got to go above and beyond all the time. And like Bill said, it's going to be really stressful, but you can do it. Uh, a piece of advice that I got when I was in grad school, I was having a really hard time trying to figure out like how to approach my whole path and direction of what to do with my grad research and where to go with it. And I had several of my professors give similar pieces of advice that said, don't specialize on a particular culture, uh, specialize in a particular skill. So like whether that's a technology or a theoretical model or a method, whatever it is, specialize with that because you can carry that almost anywhere on the planet. And
It's
I
good
think that
advice.
that's yeah, it's good advice, and I think that there are so many examples of kind of hot shots in archaeology who have done that successfully. And like one of the people that I guess like two of the people that I cited heavily in my research. One is Doug Kennett, who is one of the leaders of human behavioral ecology as a theoretical framework. He developed that framework in California and worked up and down the Pacific coast, applying that model, especially in California. But now he's working in Belize. He's applied it elsewhere, and he's been able to find jobs in some prestigious universities and really uh, have a lot of say and autonomy within his departments and stuff. And a lot of his students have gone on to do amazing research as well. And then another example is a researcher named Simon Holdaway, who's he's in New Zealand at the University of Otago, but he's done a lot of work on landscape approaches uh, to arid landscapes. And so he developed that approach in Australia, and now he's working in Egypt, and he's taking it to other landscapes as well. And so it's not just arid landscapes. He's able to work all over the planet. And I have a few other friends who have been able to work not just as Mayanists, but now they're also working in Cambodia on the ancient Khmer culture and all that. And so it's it's one of those things where that's also it falls in line with Bill's advice that you've got to dominate on all fronts and you've got to be doing it all the time. And so you can approach whatever your research interests are, you can approach that in different areas, but you can also take that to an interdisciplinary approach as well. And I think that tends to be the path where a lot of researchers are seeing um, opportunities and doors opening, because you're pulling from a bigger pot of funding and opportunities than just archaeology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd like to say something else that Bill mentioned as well is again something we've focused on on this podcast time and time again, is that there isn't a linear progression to anything. There's no checklist that we can put out there that says this is what you do to be this, because you can do it a lot of different ways. And like what Bill's been saying, he's taken a very different path than was even suggested to him, and he's had some success with it. I mean, he's moving on and he's moving up and doing what he wants to do. So and Bill, you didn't even mention, I think some of the things that may have helped you, I don't really know, when you're talking to different universities and doing different things and looking for jobs, the fact that you're a pretty prolific blogger and you get a lot of comments on that. You've been on the CRM Arc podcast for the last 4 or 5 years. I don't know if that helped or hurt you at all.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and you've
would
published a book too. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's worth
Yeah,
noting that you've also published a book. No, what, two books, right?
3.
3,
Three.
yeah.
Yeah, so
I,
yeah, that's the other thing that I would say when it comes to CRM jobs. That has gotten me pretty far, because even if the PI hasn't actually heard of my podcast or blogging, you just name drop it, and like, within minutes somebody at the crew or someone at the company has heard of it, right? And actually, there's been other opportunities that have come because of that. Like, I've gotten to teach some online courses through the Center for Digital Archaeology there at Berkeley, and we've been on this podcast. And there's been other opportunities to do other podcasts and stuff, and so I've been in the loop doing a whole bunch of other stuff because in addition to actually wanting to do good archaeology and research, I wanted to help other people. And so coming from a place of seeing not really a lot, I mean, I guess there's more and more these days of assistance and information for people who want to do CRM. I mean, I guess our blogs and the podcasts and all that stuff are the main force or the source of that stuff. But since we started doing this, I have at least started to hear university departments ask about how they can do a better job of teaching their graduate students, or what can they do to prepare students. I mean, they're really concerned, and then they find out that we're on the podcast, and so they pull us to the side and talk. So it has helped a lot with CRM because they kind of know who I am, and after doing this for 4 years, 5 years, they kind of know what they're getting. And it's not just like some personal website that's got like my favorite academia edu papers that I wrote in school and a couple of pictures of me working in the field. It is years worth of information, like 200 and something blog posts, more than 100 podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff doesn't happen overnight, but that's the kind of stuff that you create an identity for yourself that makes it really easy. A company will know, oh, well, this jerk, he's going to want to do everything the right way, and I kind of just want someone to fill out the forms. Or, whoa, this is the kind of guy that we need that can maybe change the way our filling out the forms is, not just a generic task, but actually adds to archaeology.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we've answered a lot of Ed's questions. He's got just a few things left in here that I want to talk about. And he says his whole life he's been chasing this goal through all these twists and turns. And it seems like his past experiences have been shaping him towards CRM. So I just, that there are going to be a lot of twists and turns in this path, no matter what you decide to do, for anybody. I mean, even if you've been in this for 5, 10 years, 15 years, you're still navigating the twists and turns. But like Ed is doing here, he has a goal in mind, and he's gaining skills along the way that will help him in that goal. And he's trying to move up, and he's keeping his eye on the prize. If the minute you stop doing that and you start looking at something else, or you get distracted, like I know a number of people that they get frustrated by the fact that they don't have a high-paying job right now. They don't have even a middle-paying job, and they're getting frustrated by travel. They're getting frustrated by not having enough work and things like that. And then they get a winter job working somewhere that's actually giving them benefits and a salary, and then they just stay there. They get out of archaeology forever because they get comfortable and used to that. Now, I'm not saying there is not any validity to that. If you find something else that you like, then you should do it. But give it a shot. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. Perhaps if you can, wait on having a family until you've been in this for a little while. Bill, I mean, I don't know how you do it with all the kids you've got. I don't even know how many kids you're up to at this point, but it's quite a few. All the kids.
All the
kids.
All the kids. Well, what I would say is there's never a good time to get married or have a kid, and there's never a bad time, right?
That's probably
so like
true.
Your life is always going to be the same level as it is in the present. And sometimes everything's hitting on all cylinders and you got, everything's working out well. And then other times, it's not working out. And with a fiance, I mean, she doesn't stay a fiance forever, man. You're gonna have to get married someday. It's not like they just sit around waiting or whatever for you to ride up, right? So if you've already proposed, that ball is rolling, and hopefully it's rolling in the right direction, right? So don't hesitate. Go ahead. You found a good one. Be a husband. Go ahead. Start. As far as the children, I mean, that's part of life. You're always going to want more. If you always want more, then it'll be difficult for you to ever get things in a row for you to have kids, right? So if you're taking care of business and you're not like in total trouble of losing your truck and your house and all that stuff, and your wife or your fiance has got a job, hey, what's to say you can't have a kid, right? Like if that was what you wanted to do with your life and you wanted to be a father, don't let your dream of being an archaeologist get in the way, because there's so many ways you can be an archaeologist that you don't even actually have to get paid, right? You can draw upon your carpentry skills and do all that stuff as your main job, and then just volunteer at archaeology sites. Some of the best volunteer archaeologists are retired people who just really loved archaeology, and when they retired, that they just spend all their time volunteering at sites, right? And these are people who had kids and whole lives and mortgages and careers and all this other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're gonna be a family, you're gonna be a husband, you're gonna have kids, just choose a time. Don't worry about hitting some kind of high level of, well, when I have a house and 2 new cars, and when I finally get in a stable position, because there is no such thing as stability. And when you have a kid, you'll definitely know there's no such thing as stability.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you're ready and you and your spouse, both understand, like, hey, I'm doing archaeology, I might have to leave town sometimes. And she's like, well, I'm working on my career, I'm going to have to leave town sometimes as well. You guys will figure out how to make it happen, because there's like no planning necessarily for being a parent, because you can sit there and plan and then everything goes sideways. So if you're going to be a husband, you're going to be a father, just do it. Don't let that hold you back. You can be both. You can be an
Yeah.
archaeologist and a husband.
Well, hopefully Ed's listened to the last 2 episodes of the CRM Rock podcast, and hopefully hopefully his fiance is not in archaeology or history major, and she's doing something else, because Ed, she's your side hustle. You know that, right?
I do feel like it helps if your
Right.
spouse is not in cultural resources. However, I do know several, people who have raised their kids and they're older and they're like retirement age,
Oh yeah.
and they both parents worked in cultural resources their whole careers. So it can happen, right? And actually, that's way more likely than becoming a professor at a prestigious university.
Yeah, I was just at the Society for California Archaeology conference they have every year, and there were a shocking number of children there. Not just like, not like young kids either. Like I think they were maybe doing some other things, but like babies, people with the baby carriers, women and men, having their kids. There was one guy who was there over talking to us at the booth, and the poster session was on the other side of the room, and we were actually talking to his dad who came to the conference, and he came over to hand his kid to his dad, and he said, "Can you watch her for a little while? I'm doing a poster." I mean, so you can make it work.
Yeah.
You can make it work.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife watches. She's not interested in the blog.
Mhm.
She likes that I blog, I think, because I'm quiet when I'm writing. But she likes that I do archaeology, and I have even gotten her to come out to archaeology sites before, and she actually has even dug before, right?
Nice.
But she cares about the conferences because she wants to know where it's at. Because she knows if I can work out a hotel room, that saves her. So
Mhm.
every time she finds out that the conference is in Hawaii, or groups I'm not even actually a member of in
Yeah.
Tahiti, hey, do a paper there, see if you can get travel money to go there. And I'm like, honey, I don't know anything about like the Polynesian Islands, I don't know anything. Well, just write something and then maybe they'll let you go. And I'm like, but then we'd have to all go. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
I guess my final comment is just to thank you, Ed, for emailing in. We really appreciate the comments, and I hope this was helpful. But it sounds like you're on the right path. You're being really proactive, thinking about your career, in advance, and reaching out, trying to get advice, and doing some research on it. That's more than most people do, and I'd say you've got a leg up because you've got a lot of experience. Like Webby said in the first segment, your experience in the military is going to be pretty valuable. And then as you had mentioned in your email, sounds like you understand the contracting process more than most do. So good on you, man, and keep it up. And to any of our other listeners, absolutely feel free to reach out and email. We really like reading your emails.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the one thing the elephant in the room, maybe we'll have to have a whole nother podcast, is the fact that he does have military experience, and every base installation, they all need archaeologists. And so someone who has archaeology experience, especially with a graduate degree and military experience, is like, every military base and bombing range, Air Force base, every place I've ever worked on, Homeland Security installation, there's some archaeologist, and a lot of times it's difficult for them to find a vet who has that. So your position as a vet, that's an excellent attribute.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again, Ed, as Chris said, and hopefully this helped. More than likely, it generated 700 more questions. So please send those in. It helps us put these episodes together because honestly, I say in the end of the outro, we want to know what you want to know about. I just don't want to be making up stuff and saying it on the podcast because that doesn't help anybody. So please, anybody else listening, send in a question like Ed did or a series of questions, and we will dedicate an entire show to answering it because that's what we're doing here. That's what we're here for. So, all right. Thanks, and thanks for listening, and come back next time. Be sure to listen to those last 2 episodes, 105 and 106, all about the side hustle. That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/CRM Arc Podcast. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for the episode. You can also email me at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag CRMArcPodcast, or you can tag @ArcPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to the show wherever you saw it. If you share CRM archaeology-related items on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else for that matter, be sure to use the hashtag CRMArc so the community can see and comment. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Also, please consider donating to the Archaeology Podcast Network. Your donations help fund our bandwidth and contribute to our editing costs. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Take it easy.
Bye. I got you, Doug. Don't worry.
This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and edited by Chris Sims.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.